Welcome to another episode of the Embodied Union podcast. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Lindsay.
And today we are talking about
what we bring from the past into our current relationship.
Great, because we all do this. And often it's outside of awareness.
And I think that's probably the biggest part. It's like we say we want a conscious relationship, and conscious in the sense of like we want our partner to be conscious. But of course, we have our own blind spots. So we're also really talking about how we have blind spots in our relationship, and that, you know, it came up today where it's like we're needing to give each other reflections, and sometimes those reflections are a bit hard, you know, as therapists ourselves. It's like we need to be constantly keeping our own stuff in check, and we need to do that for couples in relationship. They need to be doing that for themselves as well, where it's like, oh, I'm bringing in my beliefs and my past hurts and my stories all into relationship, and my partner has to navigate those as well.
I suppose that's probably the crux of what we do with couples. I guess when they come in, they might have some idea that we're going to fix their partner, but really what we're doing is teaching them about their own individual baggage and how they each can take responsibility for what they bring. And like relationship really falls down when we're overly focused on the other and like what they're doing, what they're up to. It's like we actually don't have control over the other person. All we do have control over is our own stuff. So when we can turn the focus around and when we can have a level of self-responsibility, it's actually a lot more empowering. You don't end up feeling like such a victim in your relationship. It's like, okay, well, how am I creating this? What's my part here? What am I bringing? Like we all have emotional baggage that we've been carrying since childhood, and adult relationship is the arena in which it all plays out.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, our partner has work to do as well, but we have to focus on what it is we are bringing.
Yeah, every day. And it shows up, you know, and like for me, I've had, I wouldn't say an unusual upbringing, but in the sense of like a lot of what I hear women talk about, their experiences with men, has actually been my experience with women. So I feel like sometimes I have a bit of a skewed view, and it's one of the parts for me that I really have to continue to do my work around healing my parts. And I think this is really important when it comes to people being a therapist, and I see this a lot in the coaching realm, coaching spaces, people coaching from a place of wounds, you know. And as a therapist who has supervision, it's like it's really important for me to have it constantly reflected of like, how am I getting out of the way such that I can be a better therapist? So although I have my stories and beliefs and previous hurt and all those things, it's like I have the ability to park those things and be neutral, as a therapist should be, you know? But it's not to say that I don't have them. So it's no different. So I'm speaking from my point of view as a therapist, but for the listeners that are just in relationship, it's like, how are you seeing your partner through the guise or through the lens of all the beliefs and stories and experiences you're having, and kind of like, are you putting your partner on trial?
And you're making them responsible. Like I can speak into my experience of having an absent father figure, and then every single relationship I had trying to make my partner give me the unconditional love of a man, like of a father. And so even with you, you know, like desperately tried to pry unconditional love from you, which is making you responsible for the void that I feel. And for a truly intimate relationship to flourish, we can't be projecting onto our partner in this way. We can't be making them responsible for the wounds that they did not create.
And I think that's the kind of the crux of this episode is like, you know, this is what I think is happening unconsciously in a lot of relationships is we have hurts, and it could even be my partner has hurt me, has done those things.
Like I have the evidence.
Yeah, but that hurt was already there. That hurt has been there for such a long period of time, and we're just waiting for our partner to do that thing that then further perpetuates our story and belief is that, you know, men are shit, or women aren't be able to held responsible, or, you know, the feminine doesn't like accountability or whatever it might be. Like some of those are my beliefs that I've had and I've had to work on and work through. And then in my relationship with you, it's like you give me all the evidence in the world that you're responsible and that you take accountability and you're the first person to take ownership on stuff. Like it's one of the things that I love about you, because I know that you do that in your own work. It's like, I want to do a good job and I know that I need to be self-responsible, you know? And you don't, what I love about you is you don't collapse taking responsibility with being wrong. And I think that's a big one sometimes in relationship.
That's often why, like in relationship, just say I did want to bring you something, and if you actually, one of your wounds is going on the defense.
Yes.
So if one partner wants to bring something into the awareness, like, hey, I don't appreciate this, like if you can't receive feedback, then like you're going to meet me with defense, and then we don't actually get to heal the part that's coming up.
Yeah, it's just our defense mechanism fighting up against the other hurt. It's like hurt versus hurt, right versus wrong, true versus false. And it becomes this very tit for tat arena of relationship where pretty much love doesn't exist. It's just battling out for power, battling out for who is right, and making the other, or kind of invalidating each other is what it kind of boils down to, is what I see the common relationship settles down into, the conflict phase, because couples aren't able to take responsibility or repair properly. Conflict just turns into resentment because it's never actually fully healed, you know? And then it's like, oh, well, this isn't the right relationship for me. I move on. Next relationship feels really good. And then I perpetuate all the baggage and story that I have going into the next relationship, and I further create it again. I see this so often. It's almost like we end up creating the ultimate villain in the other because we're not taking responsibility for how it's ours, you know? And I think that is a real big trap in the modern day relationships of like, how do I stop that?
So what are your suggestions?
Honestly,
how do I stop that?
Yeah.
How do couples, like what's the work here? I know like the first part is the awareness that you are coming along with a whole bunch of emotional baggage, and awareness is always the first step.
Yeah.
Just acknowledging what you bring, what your blueprint is, what you learnt in childhood, what you make relationship mean, like is love safe?
Yeah.
Like all the beliefs, you need to have awareness around your beliefs.
Yeah, and I think it's watching how it's playing out. I think the how is very important even over the why. The why can just be the why is just deeper, more into the weeds, whereas like how shows us the evidence. So, you know, having this level of inquiry means that, like you say, the awareness comes up of like, this is happening again. This argument or this upset that I'm having is showing up.
Awareness of it being a bit of a loop.
Yeah, and as soon as we get the loop, it's like, I think what naturally happens at this point is, I can't believe that it could be me. So I am never the problem. And the other part of that is people never think that they're the victim. I mean, they're the bad guy in relationship or bad person. It's always the other. So if that's not necessarily the case, how could I be perpetuating this? Or how am I playing my part out in this? So I think the awareness, and then realizing how am I responsible for this, or how am I contributing to this, is probably the next step of awareness.
So awareness and then self-responsibility. How am I creating this? What am I contributing? How can I take responsibility for it to be different? How am I showing up? It's getting really honest with yourself.
Yeah, and that ability to have self-awareness and self-inquiry without blaming or shaming yourself, I think is a really important factor. So self-discovery and self-awareness has also an element of learning some self-compassion. It's like, okay, knowing that my ego never wants to look. There's that part of me that never wants to be wrong. And because if I was wrong, I would be a bad person. And if I'm a bad person, no one's ever going to love me, or I'm not good enough, or whatever the big core wound might be in relationship. And it's just knowing that if I can then look at that I can then get support with it. So if I can't figure it out for myself, could I hire somebody? Could I go to therapy? Could I get support on this? Or if I'm really vulnerable, could I go to my partner and get more of a reflection, you know, and seeing my partner as someone that can support me rather than I'm in competition or I'm in a war with them, trying to gain control or power.
I think the only like slippery slope there is going to your partner for the reflection is knowing that your partner has a whole bunch of projections. So it might not be the most like unbiased person. Like I think if a couple is really stuck and it's like, but I know it's you, and lots of blame and lots of attack and resentment, like getting some outside eyes on the relationship is a really smart idea. Someone who can show you the blind spots, because even your partner is too in it.
Yeah.
They're too in it. And when your partner's offering you something as well, if you don't like what you're hearing, it can be like it just doesn't land. You're not going to take it on.
It's really hard. I say this to couples all the time. It's so hard to not take your partner personally because they're the person right in front of you, you know? And that's what happens when we're in relationship. We're externalizing our wounds onto our partner. So the things that I believe and I'm hurt by, instead of seeing them in myself, it's easy to be distracted because you're here, that I'm like, oh, you're doing this to me.
Well, it's because when we're single, we're usually really like cool, calm and collected. So it's like, oh, I feel this way in this relationship with you, and it's your behavior and language that's triggering it, so you must be responsible. And that's the ultimate trap. And that's really, I would say, like the mainstream way to relate.
Yeah, is see the fault in the other.
You're not actually even in relationship with the other person. You're in relationship with your unhealed hurt and scared. You're in relationship with yourself, with your projections. And the other is just...
I'm just holding the mirror up. Mirror's just there, you know? And I think that's, you know, if we're speaking into this, is for each of us, and especially for the listeners, is what hurts and wounds are you bringing into this relationship that you're willing to heal?
And some of the like common ones, just to give you an idea, it's like, I'm not good enough, I am powerless, I'm not lovable, I'll be abandoned, I'm a victim. Like, it's some version of that. Most people are carrying some version of that we are making the external responsible for. And once we can recognize, I have a program that I have been carrying because of my experiences that go all the way back to childhood often.
Yeah.
And I'm playing that out, now I can start to catch it. So it's like, all right, my partner doesn't message me back, haven't heard from my partner in a day or so, and I want to be like, if you loved me, you would. Wait a minute. Maybe this is my wound, looking for evidence that I'm not lovable or I'm going to be abandoned. Yes, you can still make requests of like, I'd love to hear from you more often or whatever it is, but it's knowing, you need to know when your programs are playing out and dictating how you feel.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I definitely know for myself, it's like that fairness piece, you know, that I would have spoken into quite a lot is around like, you know, like wanting to give enough effort and are you giving the same amount and making sure that it's fair and all those sorts of things. Like, I think for all of us, we play it out and we look for evidence all the time that we're not getting what we need.
We are constantly looking for evidence to support our unconscious core material. That's the sad truth of it is that it's happening usually out of awareness.
Yes. Yeah. So even for the listeners right now, there are things that are playing out most likely in your relationship where you feel so certain and so hurt and so justified in it, and that is actually the part that keeps you disempowered. And
the truth is, if you are so certain and so triggered and so absolute and in it, then there's something to look at, because curiosity, like when you can't be curious, then you're likely in a wound.
Yes.
If you're just in the trigger and you're not able to bring a level of like grounded curiosity to it, it's like something shadowy is playing out for you. Mm-hmm.
And that to me, like in my experience, when I'm like that, that's my victim. it's happening to me. Life is happening to me and I can't control it, or it's not fair, or this isn't right. And it's all those beliefs of just like, and actually in those moments, I need to recognize that it's like, I'm having some anger around that. Like, for example, I can feel defensive, I can feel angry, and that makes me feel really justified. And often I have found for men, anger is a cover because it's easier to feel angry and upset rather than acknowledging my responsibility in it. And so sometimes anger is a cover for fear, for guilt, for shame, for unwanted emotions that I'm unable to handle. It's easier for me and my ego to deflect by using anger. And this is a lot of the times why people are angry in relationship, is that it's a protective mechanism. Often anger isn't, I'm trying to overpower anyone else. It's often the case of anger is actually there in men and women as a defense. I had it recently, someone's like, oh, can you help a man be supported with his aggression or his aggressive behavior? Aggression and aggressive behavior is usually an antidote to feeling powerless. When we feel powerless, or we've been pleasing, or we're stuck, or we're fawning, we usually go into like fight or flight to try and get ourselves out of it. And then as a result, we end up like hurting people emotionally or whatever it is. And then it's like, see, can't do that. I'm terrible. I'm a bad person. And it just goes into this huge spiral. And I think that's probably the hardest thing for couples in relationship is the honeymoon phase starts, feels amazing. And then the conflict phase starts and the looping happens and the loops just keep going. And it goes around and around and around. And it's like, how many times are you going to go around on this loop with this partner that you've got currently or the next? Because it becomes like you are the common denominator. Are you willing to heal it? Are you willing to look at it?
And sometimes that means leaving the relationship that you are in, but it's like you have to circuit break. You have to learn the skills of repair and authentic communication so you can really bring curiosity to your conflict and do something different.
Yeah, big time. So what did we say before? Observation.
Awareness.
Yeah, awareness.
Awareness of your own emotional baggage, awareness of the patterns and the programs. A really good way to do that, anything that is like on repeat, anything that is looping. It's like, that's a program. Something shadowy is playing out. So bring awareness to anything that's like, we keep going around on this.
And even if it's your partner looping, you will have a part to play in that looping as well. They might blow up and then you fawn and it's what happens, so it never goes anywhere. Or you keep going, oh, I got to wait for the right time to talk to them about something. And then you bring it up and they get defensive and then nothing happens.
So I guess it's awareness of the patterns, and the next piece is self-responsibility. Instead of doing what most people do, which is focusing on how your partner is showing up, have the self-responsibility inquiry of, how am I creating this? How am I contributing? Like, what is my part to play here? How am I projecting an unconscious wound into this pattern that we're looping on? And like, it's quite a deep line of inquiry. But I think just start there, awareness, and then how am I creating this? What's my part?
Yep, because the truth of it is often, like I speak into this for men is, and I said it last night and the night before around the ghost figures, it's like often at times we become, we try and become the man that our mother never had so we can complete the fairy tale that she never got. And it's like in relationship, it's like I'm coming in trying to be the best version of myself, hoping that I will be loved and accepted for it, but it might not even be what's wanted or needed in the relationship, So it's like, how could I be more present, in agreement with my relationship rather than assuming, rather than guessing, And I think that's why you and I are such a big components of setting up agreements in relationships, setting up boundaries, setting up values, is because where's this all going? I think that's the thing. Often at times, couples are just trying to have an easy, peaceful life, but they have no way of knowing how to set that up powerfully in relationship. We're just hoping that it works. And if And if it would work way better if my partner would just be better. You know, that's often the thought process. It's like, it's got nothing to do with me, and it would just be, my relationship would be better if you were better. So can you be better? It's not how it works.
So we have awareness, then we have self-responsibility, and then what you're speaking into there is really couples having more intentionality around what they're wanting to create. I think that is often a bit of the trap where couples just fall into relationship and hope for the best, like you're saying. But it's like, have the conversations. Like, what are your wants, needs, and desires? What are your values, knowing that they get to change all the time? And how are we moving the needle? How are we working towards that? How am I showing up to meet what you're looking for? And how are you showing up? Like, these conversations get to happen
regularly as well, because this is the thing. If we don't have a relationship set up that has regular inquiry around this stuff, because there's like a business, you work in the business and you also work on the business, and I see it exactly the same in relationship. How are you in the relationship, and then how are you both working on the relationship, knowing that a relationship is a you, a me, and an us. And the us has its own identity that's separate from you and I.
And it has its own, it needs other things, you know, like, for example, if I was just filling Charlie's needs, it's like more time with Lindsay, more time with Lindsay, more togetherness, more togetherness. I love that. But the relationship, the us, thrives when we have space in the togetherness.
That's right.
Taking intentional space so we can come together and have polarity. So it's like, I get to fill the cup of me, and I also have to think about what serves the relationship, which is also, that's a really great question to ask yourself, or to see if you can remember when you are in conflict. It's like, what would actually serve the relationship right now? Because I'm just fighting for my trigger.
Yes.
And he's fighting for his. But like, what does the relationship actually need? And maybe that line of inquiry can soften the tension. It's just like, let's put our swords down and think about this third energy that needs us. Can we fight to be in love? Can we fight for the relationship rather than fighting for our unhealed hurt and scared?
Yes. And I think that becomes then what to do about it is to have that level of inquiry on a regular basis of like, all right, we're going to set up a monthly meeting, or we're going to set up time together to actually have these conversations. Because often at times what is happening is the hurt pops up, or the wound that's always there gets triggered. And then while we're triggered, we're trying to have a conversation around it. And we both know how that goes. That's even hard for us. If one of us is triggered by something and we're trying to resolve it or talk about it, it doesn't take long for it to put enough pressure on either of us that we're unable to hold it for each other.
And I think what happens for couples is, because once the trigger passes, it's like, let's just forget about it.
Oh yeah.
Let's just forget about it. And then we just move on. So like you said earlier, true repair, like complete repair, isn't actually happening. So
That's
it's
right.
like, we really do need to we need to talk about what happened while we're now in this more regulated state, so we can move from the conflict and now create the clarity. You might not reach the clarity while one of you or both is still in the trigger, but like, keep that conversation open, because that's how conflict becomes healing opportunities.
Yeah, and I think this is the part where it's like, it's actually respectful. And I think often at times couples in relationship are not feeling loved because they're not feeling respected. And it's not just a man feeling respected thing, even though that's commonplace these days, that like the man needs respect to be loved. A woman needs respect to be loved too. It's a human thing. You know, we both need that. And if we are doing that exact thing that you're talking about, which is, once the fight is over, can we just move on, or can we just forget about it, really does go nowhere. Like, we really do need to be doing the work around it. And often what I see is people don't know how, so that's why they don't. It's like, I don't actually know how to fully repair this.
This is why we teach this.
This is a skill.
And like, it's actually a skill. And there's things like, sometimes if we're in conflict, and like you did it the other day and I've done it before, but when we take space, we actually go and sit down and journal and like figure out like, how did I create what just happened? And then when we come back together, it's like, here's what I can take responsibility for. Here's what I figured out. Here's the deeper truth. And that conversation is the repair that creates the healing.
Yeah. And and I know this is such a hard thing because I know I've experienced it in the past, is where you might feel like the only one taking all the responsibility and the other isn't able to, but it's honestly the only way it works. Waiting for the other person to take responsibility is a fool's game, because that was my fool's game, is like realizing that, you know, I take responsibility for my part, and then if my partner never does, that doesn't feel good. So I so get that as well. And that's what I actually love about you is I went away the other day, I wrote a big long laundry list of how I got to this place. And then afterwards, it was like you were so in the inquiry as well. Because I led that inquiry, not that I led it because you do as well, but it's
But
like...
you led it that time.
Yes.
You know?
And just being in that responsibility, it's like when I'm taking full responsibility for my part in whatever upset
Softens
happens.
me.
Definitely did.
I think the thing that couples need to also keep in mind is make sure it's not just one of you that's constantly initiating the repair, constantly the one that has to come and knock on the door with the laundry list. It's like it had both, like different times, different one, like someone will do it, but it's make the effort. Know that it supports that third entity, the us, for you both to be initiating repair.
Collaboration. You know, it's just like, and this is why I always come back to, it's like, I'm selfish, but I'm trying to be the MVP in the relationship. Like, that's really what I'm trying to do here. And it's not that I'm competitive. It's just like, I just really take my relationship seriously. Like, it means a lot because I know how good my life's experience can be when my relationship is good. Because I know how woeful and terrible my life experience can be when my relationship is not good. And that's the thing I think for so many of us is like, we say we want to be in relationship and we get into relationship, but then we're making it a lot harder for ourselves than we really need to be. It's like, if you're not, and I wrote that post this week around, you know, treat your relationship seriously, you know, because it's a privilege to be in one. If you're in a relationship and you're just fighting to be right and making the other wrong, are you seriously want to be in that relationship? Because would you like to be on the receiving end? Like, would you date you? I think it's always a really good inquiry. It's like, would you date you? Is this how you would want to be treated? It's massive. So what else? Is there anything else that we want to touch on?
I think that pretty much covers it. It's having awareness, taking responsibility, being intentional, setting your relationship up powerfully, remembering when you've lost curiosity, then you're probably in a stuck place. How can you come back to curiosity? And I think that's a really great start. Knowing that it can be really supportive to have outside eyes if you just are in it, if you're really in it. It's hard to see your blind spots. Lindsay and I, like, we get therapy. Yes. We go and see a therapist when stuff comes up for us, even though we are therapists, because we can't like, it's just, we all have blind spots. We all have stuff.
Yeah, every single person has blind spots. We can't not. That's the human experience. And there's so much benefit of looking there. That is a great place to be looking, to have growth and to get to know yourself more and to have a better relationship. It's like, instead of polishing and cleaning what you can see, it's like, how about going in and venturing into those unknown places to really get some growth, to really take part in your own relationship as a collaboration. So, if that's the end of the podcast, what happens if someone lives around the Gold Coast area in the next couple of months? What's happening for us?
This is really exciting, actually, because it's been such a long time coming. We've been talking about it for 2 years. It's finally landed that we are going to do a half-day workshop. We're going to do a half-day workshop and we're going to spend, I think it's about 5 hours, really working not only with the relationship dynamic, but helping couples to do this individual, like the internal work. And we're going to touch on the intimacy piece. So internal work, relational skill building, and authentic intimacy. And it's really exciting because we know so many of you from online. We do most of our work is based online. And now we actually get to squeeze you and see you and like go deeper with you. It's so exciting.
I'm so pumped. So what's the dates for that?
The 7th of September on the Gold Coast. It's going to be Intimate numbers. I think that's important when it comes to a workshop like this. So limited space. If you are interested and you are on the Gold Coast or you're willing to make the trip to the Gold Coast for it,
It'd be worth it.
send us a message because we do have an early bird price that is going to end in a couple of days at the end of the month. And yeah, if you have any questions,
Then please
reach out. I don't think that's pretty much, like, it's going to be great.
I'm really looking forward
It's
to
going
it.
to be like, there's going to be a practical element. We'll take you through practices, processes, as well as like insightful teachings. Like, it's going to tick both those boxes.
I'm pumped to do stuff in person. As a presenter for years, it's like I really love doing the in-person transmission, and it's such a beautiful day for relationship and for yourselves, like knowing that you're actually probably going to come in, like most people, excited, a bit nervous, but walking away with epic tools.
And just feeling like deeply connected. Like, it's the best date night, even though it'll be a morning, early afternoon workshop. It's the perfect date to take yourselves on.
Big
It's
time.
the best gift for the relationship, really, to do something like this.
Yeah. Well, I'm Lindsay B on Instagram.
I am Charlie S. Hannah, and then we have the Embodied
Embodied
Union.
Union.
I think that's it.
Love you, critter.
Thank you, my love.